Hey everyone! Thank you for joining us for the next session of our Agentic DevOps Live series. My name is Anna. I'll be your producer for this session. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenter to answer live. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Reactor channel. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our speaker for today. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Anna, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all for joining. I hope that this is going to be a great session, and I really encourage you to ask questions in the chat as we go along. I'll try and answer as many of those as I can, but I'd really like to hear from you. If you see problems, if you have experiences you'd like to see us do something different, please let me know. I have a great friend, our engineering manager, Kay, in the chat with me today. And so she'll be answering questions as she can. And then we'll try and capture some of those on screen too, assuming we have enough time. So today we're going to go through a journey. We're going to talk about taking your code and moving it to the cloud, specifically Azure. And we're going to do this with GitHub Copilot, and we're going to do it with the Azure Skills plugin. And so I've got a few slides we're going to go through just to level set, help make sure that we're all on the same page. Everybody understands what MCP is. I'm assuming that's the case. But we're going to talk about some skills and other things that we're doing. And then we're going to get into the demos, and that'll be the fun part. So let's get rolling. All right. So we have a situation today. We have great agents. They're fantastic at writing code, but they can't always do things. And so one of the things we're trying to do is we want to give them a set of tools to allow them to collect information from Azure, to allow them to take action on Azure. And that's going to help them solve problems, make decisions. It's going to give you the information you need so that you can make those decisions and solve those problems. So we're going to talk about a number of services today that we support. We'll show some examples of some of those. But when you think about Azure, there are hundreds of services that are out there. And so it can be confusing for people to figure out, I need to deploy a web app and I want to put it onto a Azure. Where should I do this? So the GitHub Copilot with the Azure Skills plugin that we'll talk a little bit about can help answer those questions, like which service matches up with this application that I have. Copilot can scan the application, look for information. It can use tools and skills that we have to help you map that to the appropriate Azure service. If you understand what kind of load that you're going to be facing on a service, then Copilot plus the skills can help you map the right SKU or level of compute that you may need in order to support that particular that workload that you've got. And then there's tools in there, there's skills that'll help validate things before we go to deployment. Steps that you don't have to do. We know what those best practices are, so we've encoded them, and we're giving Copilot the power to run those on your behalf. And so we're going to walk through a number of those things today. So I want to cover real quick Model Context Protocol. So this is something that probably almost everybody knows, but I have bumped into a few people lately who haven't, and and that's terrific. This is a capability that allows an LLM or an agent such as GitHub Copilot or Claude Code, we work with Claude Code too, allows your agent to perform an action. That action can be to create something, it could be to read something. We have tools specifically in the Azure MCP server that allow you to query information from Azure. Some of those capabilities may overlap with CLI type tools. So the Azure CLI has the ability to do a lot of things. And so we have there's a little bit of overlap between those two. But MCP was designed specifically with agents in mind. And so it provides the ability for those agents to be able to communicate with Azure in our case. There's lots of other MCP servers out there, and we'll talk about one of those today. So we have the host. This is the part where you're connecting the MCP. So in this case, we have VS Code, Visual Studio. Like I mentioned, this could be Claude Code, it could be Cursor, Windsurf, you name it. All of those are hosts that have the ability to connect up an MCP server. And then within that host, you may have a client. So some of those hosts I mentioned are kind of clients themselves, like Claude Code. It's kind of a host and a client all in one. VS Code has GitHub Copilot in there as a client, and then that client is able to use the MCP server. And then we have the server. So we have the Azure MCP server, we have Foundry MCP servers. There's a bunch of MCP servers out in the wild today. One of the things that you'll see, we believe this is the right approach, but we'd love to get your feedback, is we are collecting a lot of those tools around Azure, and we're combining them into a single MCP server, the Azure MCP. We're doing that because we want it to be easy for you to download one package, one MCP server, or in our case, a plugin that includes that MCP server, and add that to your host or your client, and then be able to use it without having to manage a bunch of different MCP servers. There's a lot happening in the industry right now. We believe this is the right approach, but there's other opinions out there. And so over time, we will keep learning. We will keep listening to everyone here, all of our customers, and figure out if we need to make changes to this. So if you see problems, please let us know. We'd love to learn from you. Okay. So the Azure MCP server, let's go a little bit deeper. We have over 200 tools in the Azure MCP server. So when you think about the breadth of Azure, there's hundreds and hundreds of services that Azure has. And then we might have multiple tools per service. So we're not covering every single thing that Azure has today. And these numbers, actually, I should probably bump these up. We're probably, I think it's 265 tools and over 50 Azure services now. So this is growing on a weekly basis. We're shipping very regularly. We're adding to this, and we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't overwhelm your agent. And so there's some challenges there that we're learning from and growing on. We're doing this. I saw a question earlier about some of the authentication. And so we're using Entra ID. We have the Azure Identity Library. So when we connect from your agent to Azure, we're doing it in a secure manner, and we're doing it as you. So we're not giving your agent its own account, its own ability to do things. Your agent can only do the work that you can do. And then depending on how you've configured your agent, you can approve or deny requests that your agent may have to perform certain actions. So I mentioned already that we work with GitHub Copilot, and this could be GitHub Copilot in the CLI, could be in VS Code, could be in Visual Studio, could be the coding agent on github.com. Plus we work with Claude Code, Windsurf, Cursor, you name it. Anybody that is MCP compatible, our MCP server will work there. And we have a ton of different actions that we can perform. This is just a tip of the iceberg here. So listing resources, running Kusto queries or KQL queries. What's been fascinating to us as we have gone through this process and build this and put this out there, our most popular tool by far is our Kusto tool that allows you to both create and then run queries. Apparently, there's a lot of people out there like me who are not Kusto experts. I came up writing SQL, and I understand that well, and I can translate it to Kusto. But having an agent that can write the Kusto queries for me has been super helpful. So it's fascinating to see like what's really resonated with the community and which of the tools are having the biggest impact. So if you're using the Azure MCP or you're using the Azure Skills and there's things that are working really well for you, share those in the chat. Let other people know that they may want to try it out. And also, if you're having problems, share those as well. Let us know what's going wrong so that we can improve things. So we talked about the MCP. Last fall, Anthropic came out with this standard around skills. And so we rapidly dove in, and there's about 25 skills that we have right now. And I'm going to dive into the architecture of these a little bit. So 25 skills does not cover all of Azure. We have skills that are in our plugin. At the top level, there's 25, but then those skills have many reference files. And so we have this model of progressive disclosure where we give the agent a little bit of information, and then we help it find the next level of information and the next level of information. What we're doing here, our skills will often have references to the MCP tools. So that means that we can have a skill that's helping with deployment, and that deployment skill might call the Azure Developer CLI tool to help actually perform the deployment for it, or it can call MCP tools. So we're blending the tools available to the agent, and we're telling the agent through the skills which tools are best suited for certain scenarios. So we'll walk through this specifically when we get to the demo. But what this creates is we have the skills at the top level, and those are kind of the entry point we want the agent to use. And then we have a bunch of tools across both Azure and Foundry. And then in addition to that, we have all the CLI tools, Azure Developer CLI, Azure CLI, you name it. There's a bunch of tools out there that we can use. And then again, all of this is supported across any agent that supports MCP, skills, or the new plugin container that we have. So you can learn more about that too on the website. And I'll share that link here in just a little bit. So we've talked through some of this stuff, and just to kind of hopefully connect the dots a little bit more. So the MCP tools, those are the things that are really intended to take action. Before skills showed up, we actually had tools, and we still have them to some extent in the MCP server, that just provide instructions, provide guidance to the model. We currently have, there's clients that we support that only support MCP and they don't support skills. So those tools are still inside of our MCP server. Over time, those will probably move just into the skills, where we just have those instructions, the recipes, whatever you may want to call it, just located in the skills. But the MCP tools, those are to take action. The skills, those are really the guidance. Those are the steps that the model needs to follow in order to complete something. It can help provide information about making good decisions. Which service should I use? Which way should I do deployment? How do I help the user understand the difference between using Bicep and Terraform, which are important. Customers may have different opinions on which approach to take. So the goal is to have a rich set of skills that can move the user down that path. Then we also have some agents, and we hadn't alluded to those yet. So we have agents, and these specifically we're shipping inside of VS Code in our extension in VS Code that installs the skills and the MCP server. Those agents basically put you on Rails. And so the idea is we're able to, from the agent, leverage skills and tools to make sure that you stay in a very constrained path to follow a goal that you have. So one of those skills could help maybe do deployment. Another ones can help you architect things. And so the idea is to really make it easy for you to jump into a scoped conversation with your agent. We know that not everybody chooses to do those, and so that's why there's a rich set of skills in the MCP tools as well. Okay, so one of the core things that we do with Azure in order to get work from your machine, so code, up into Azure, is you need to deploy this thing. And so we have a set of skills: Azure Prepare, Azure Validate, and Azure Deploy. This is the workflow that we use to analyze the application that you have, to generate the infrastructure as code, or help make decisions on what's your deployment approach, to create CI/CD pipeline. We have all those options. And so Azure Prepare basically takes your code and wraps it in the deployment approach that you want to take. Azure Validate will then run, and that one's going to do a bunch of checks. All we're going to do is try and make sure that when we move to the deploy step, we're going to be successful. It doesn't always happen. There's gaps in there, and we'd love to learn as you find challenges with that. But the goal is to help make sure that once you've prepared your application to deploy, that you're going to have a successful deployment. And we want to catch any potential problems early. You can see we'll look at permissions, quota problems, infrastructure errors, whatever it may be. Then we move on to the deploy phase. Typically, our preferred approach here is using the Azure Developer CLI or using CI/CD. And so this is Azure Developer CLI is a great solution when you're setting up, if you're in a small business and the developer happens to have access to production, or if you're in a large business and the developer is actually just doing quick deployments to their test environment so that then they can run through and verify everything's working. So you might use AZD in that case, and then you might move to the CI/CD approach so that you have a pipeline that's going to route this through your DevOps team and then help you do the deployments through, an approved, safe approach. So we support both of those, and we try and make it as easy as possible for you. Okay, so now we're getting close to the demo. So in the demo, we're gonna talk about how to install the plugin. And as I mentioned, the plugin contains the MCP server and the skills. We also have language server providers that are in there as well. Actually, I should ask Kay if that's shipped yet. Maybe she can comment. If they're not there now, they will be soon. So we want to have LSPs, language server providers, in there. So if you're working with Terraform or you're working with Bicep, then we're basically giving the model the ability to really deeply understand that code and validate that the infrastructure as code that it writes is correct. We're going to go through some examples in the demo of how to prompt things. So we're going to, there's a lot of things you can ask. And I would encourage you, after you install the plugin, just try poking around, asking random questions about your Azure infrastructure, your applications, ask architecture questions. Ask the things that are really interesting to you, and then see how it goes. In some of these, you may not get the perfect answer on the first response. You may have to follow up and give it a little bit more information. The skills activate. So we're going to talk through that specific chain that we described on the previous slide. And then we're going to look specifically into skills that are getting called and tools that are getting called, so you can understand what's happening here. And then we're going to take a look at this application that we've deployed, and you can check it out. So in the MCP servers in the demo here, we have the Azure MCP, we have the GitHub MCP. That's so I can do some of the CI/CD work and work with, Git and GitHub. The Playwright MCP, I saw a question in the chat about this. So Playwright MCP, that one's great for once you deploy something to tell the model to test it for you. So take advantage of those capabilities, and you can use the MCP. Playwright also has a CLI, and I would say experiment with both of them and see what works out best in your particular case. But I use that all the time. I want to create an application or I want to deploy an application. And then I want Copilot to fix anything that it finds so that when I finally show up to take a look at it, that it's all working, at least as much as Copilot and Playwright together can figure out. And then Context 7, we find is super helpful for doing a better job creating applications. It gives the model access to a massive trove of information. And I find it particularly helpful in working with TypeScript and some of the other frameworks for building new applications. I don't know all the details about it, and Copilot, the training that the models have that Copilot's using, don't necessarily know all the latest and greatest information. So we can reference the Context 7 MCP server, and it can go query stuff. And we're going to look at that. Okay, here we go. So on to the demo. Now we get to do the fun part. Okay, so this, if you haven't seen it yet, this is the GitHub Copilot CLI. And so there's a lot of interest from folks all over in jumping back into, the good old days of working in the terminal. And really this started with Claude Code. People got bit by that bug, and there's a lot to be said for being able to run something in the terminal, have multiple terminal sessions open, keep track of agents that are going off and doing work, and then just telling you when they're done or asking questions when they need your input. So GitHub has created the GitHub Copilot CLI. Very similar capabilities to what you'd see in VS Code with Copilot there. But obviously a terminal-focused interface here. So the key things I want to do, and I'm going to copy a couple commands. So we want to talk about installing the plugin, the Azure Skills plugin. There's 3 steps to this. So the first step is we need to come in here and we need to say /plugin. That's a command that it uses so that we can interact with the plugins inside of the Copilot CLI. We are going to add a marketplace, and that marketplace is Microsoft/Azure-skills. That's the GitHub repo where we publish the Azure Skills plugin. So I'm going to run this. Let me get back out of here. And it's going to fail because I already have that registered. So that's great, but that's the expected behavior there. So the next step is now all I need to do is do a plugin install Azure at that marketplace we just added before, Azure-skills, and Copilot's going to go ahead and install this plugin. And in this case, this is also going to fail because I already have it in there. But let's take a quick look. So there's a command in here, MCP. When I run this, you can see I have multiple MCP servers in here. And the main one we're looking at today is Azure, but we also have Playwright. Taskit is something that I'm playing with on my own. And then Context 7 that we talked a little bit about. Plus we have the GitHub MCP server, which is super important. So that's the MCP side of it, but I mentioned that the plugin includes skills as well. So I can come in here and I can list off all the skills. There's 29 in here. Some of these are from Azure Skills, the plugin that we mentioned. And you can see I have, see if I can find them. So I have Azure Prepare right here, and I have Azure Validate down here, and I have Azure Deploy. So those are 3 of the skills that we had talked about, and we're going to go deeper in those. But you can see there's a lot of other ones in here too. Azure Cost, we've recently done a lot of work pulling in some cost skills so that you can come in and you can ask questions about the money that you're spending on Azure. Even ask it, like in the case of this one down here at the bottom, how can I optimize my costs? So give that one a shot and certainly give us some feedback. So let's jump back out of there. One of the things that's important after you do after you install that, at least right now, the MCP server won't automatically load up. Like in my case, it's already loaded. So I would need to run this command if I want to use the MCP server right away, the Azure MCP. So otherwise, I can exit GitHub Copilot CLI and I can come back in, and then we'll be in great shape. Now, I know that more people are used to using VS Code, so we're going to jump into VS Code for the rest of the demo. It looks like there's a bunch of questions, but I think Kay seems to be very active answering questions there. And Kay, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. If something comes up, then I trust that Kay will ping me on the side and I can, answer a question live. So let's see. What I want to do now, so this is VS Code. The way that you install the Azure plugin, the skills plus the MCP here, the easiest way to do that is to go in here in the extensions and just search for Azure MCP server, come in here and hit install. When you install it, same thing as in the Copilot CLI, you're going to get the MCP server and you're going to get the skills. Super handy, all at one time, everything's all packaged together. So let me now show you what that looks like. So I am in agent mode, which I think is now the default here. I'm going to take a look at the tools that we have. And these are all tools. These are MCP tools and extension tools inside of VS Code. For the work we're going to do today, I'm going to have the built-in tools selected. So this is just all of VS Code's default set of tools. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to have the, give me 1 second. Hit the wrong button. There we go. I'm going to use the Azure MCP server. I'm going to have the Context 7 MCP server. I have GitHub enabled and I have Playwright enabled. So these are all the ones that we talked about before. If you want to see, let me jump back out here and we'll look at, so the Azure MCP, I mentioned there's over 200 tools, maybe like 265 now. Those are actually hidden. We follow the same progressive disclosure approach with the MCP as we do with the skills. So while in this list, let's see, 75, there are 61 tools inside the Azure MCP currently. This is what it appears to VS Code. These are namespaces. Within these namespaces, we actually have a number of tools. So there's multiple deploy tools, multiple compute tools, all hidden behind here. And the model knows how to start with these namespaces that look like tools and find the actual tool behind in order to call it. So when you see the numbers that disagree with what I had in the slide, this is why. So we're going to save that. And now we're going to actually get into doing some things. So let's see. We're going to start with some general questions here. So I'm just going to say, do you have any tools to help me troubleshoot AKS? So right now, Copilot is going to go and it's going to look through the list of tools that it has. Sometimes it may have to do a search on the tools if it hasn't done it recently. So you can see we have a skill here that it's calling called Azure Diagnostics. And then it's saying we have AKS tools. The App Lens tools can be very helpful for troubleshooting anything in Azure. Resource health tools, App Insights. So there's a number of tools here that are available. It has some built-in diagnostic skills it's going to tell you about in the Azure Diagnostics skill. And so this is a great way to explore what are the capabilities here. So let's do another one here. Let's see. Oh, let me get in the box here. How about writing and running KQL or Kusto queries? Oh, it's fantastic. It actually spelled Kusto correctly this time. That doesn't always happen. Okay, cool. So it's going to search and it's going to say, hey, there's an Azure Kusto skill. Terrific. And like I mentioned earlier, this is one of our most popular skills by far. I guess people who use it are using it on a daily basis, where if you're doing deployment or even troubleshooting, those are hopefully things that you're not necessarily doing every single day or dozens of times a day. But running Kusto queries certainly can be one of those things. Okay, and let's try another one. And can you help me deploy applications to Azure Container Apps? Here we go. And it's going to come back. And absolutely, I love it. So it's checking the Azure Deploy skill, the Azure Prepare skill, and then we're going to get an answer that says, yep, I can help with container apps. I have tools there. And then it has the end-to-end deployment workflow. So if you've been working with LLMs long enough, you'll know that I'm feeling pretty excited right now because I'm getting great answers. This doesn't always happen when you're doing a live demo. So this is working fantastically. Okay, so now let's go get some information from Azure. And this is where we're going to start digging in. Tell me about my Cosmos DB databases. Okay, so Copilot now is starting to look through, hey, what commands are available? So this is great. It's looking for the capabilities in the Azure MCP server. It's calling a tool called Cosmos List. It found one account. That's fantastic. So this is the part, like the other information is kind of general knowledge that the model might have on its own. Like when I ask about, just general deployments, things like that, there's capabilities it can do. The model would not be able to come in here and just query information about my database without having the set of tools. And that those tools could be CLI tools, but also in the MCP. So here it says I have a Lego Cosmos DB and some funky name account, and there's a Lego database in there. So this is a fun database I created. It's really interesting to check out. And let me see. I am now, what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of the fact I have data that's already sitting there. And I am going to ask Copilot to help me build a website in order to connect to that data. So this is the part that gets very interesting. So, and I'm pasting this in because it doesn't always deal with some of these words properly when I use the voice type, but let me read it to you. So how about building an amazing looking Flask app I can use to search and browse the sets and view the pictures? Let's use a Star Wars theme and Tailwind CSS with Context 7. Great. So Copilot's going to go and it's going to start working on this. However, let's do a little bit of steering. So if you haven't seen this yet, this is super helpful. I'm going to say, don't forget to test every page and every control. So you can see it's steering. So basically it's going to add that to the conversation that's happening here or to the previous prompt. Now what we're going to do, we're not going to wait. If you've been working with these models long enough, you'll know it can do a pretty good job, but it's going to take a while. So that's not going to be fun. So we're going to go pull a cake out of the oven. And in that cake, we are going to take a look at that conversation that I had before. So you can see I asked it, tell me about my Cosmos DB servers. Great. It gave me some information, basically the same information formatted a little bit differently. And here I asked it to tell me what's in the database. And it came back, it ran a query. In here, it called this Cosmos database container item query, returned a bunch of information for me. And then I got some details back. So there's 21,495 Lego sets. This is a nice database. It's got some fun stuff. And it goes back to when I was a kid, some of the sets that I had then, which is really cool. Talks about the document schema and talks about some themes. So by having access to this information, Copilot's now able to build the application without me having to say, oh, here's the schema, here's the connection to my database, here's all that stuff. Copilot now has everything it needs to go build. So in that other Copilot chat that we just left, it's continuing to build using that information. So here's the prompt that I just gave it in the other chat. So how about building the amazing looking Flask app? Fantastic. So let's take a look at what's happening here. It doesn't need a lot of what's in the Azure MCP to go build an application. This is Copilot's specialty, writing code. But what it is doing is it's actually using that context 7 library. So we can see there's multiple calls to context 7. It's querying for documentation, and then it's getting to this point where it's planning the architecture for my Flask app. Great, has all the context it needs, and then it starts building. So it's going to run, it's going to build this thing, and then you'll see right here, it's like, oh, great. Let's do it right here. So now this is when it's calling Playwright. So that steering command that I gave it, where I told it to don't forget to check all the pages and all the controls, it knows that in order to do that, it needs to use the Playwright MCP. So it's using Playwright, it's navigating to the home page, and we can even see that it took a screenshot there, that file.png. Copilot thinks it did a great job. The home page looks amazing. And so now it's doing some more testing. And what it's going to do in this process, this is all work I don't have to do. Copilot plus Playwright are just going to work together, and they're going to go through and validate that my website's working. Eventually, we're going to come down here, and it's going to finish all of this. And you can see it's doing quite a bit. I didn't notice if it's finding issues along the way, but typically it'll find issues and it will fix them as well. Here's all the details of what it tested. And then it's telling me that my app is running here. So let's run it. Let's make sure that it's running. And then we are going to take a look at it and see what it looks like before we move over. Okay, so let me refresh this. This is the live website running locally on my computer right now. And we have a new app called Lego Vault. It even picked the name. I didn't get to choose this. If I come down here, I can see that there's a bunch of Lego sets. And I can drill in and I can say, hey, let me check out this world map set. We can also see that it decided, hey, this is part of the Lego art theme. And so it's kind of cool. I didn't give it all the details. It had all this information inside my database, and it was able to put this website together based on that fairly simple instruction. I didn't have to do prompt-driven development, anything like that. So I could probably get better results that more matched my experience, but I don't have necessarily an experience in mind. I just wanted to explore and give myself something to check out what's in the database. Okay, so now let's go back, and our next step is we actually want to get this thing deployed. So this is my prompt. I needed it first. So this code's all sitting locally on my machine. In order to do CI/CD, I needed to create a Git remote somewhere that it could push this so that then it could set up the pipeline. So it created that remote, and then it deployed the app to Azure West US2 using CI/CD. So I canceled the app or the prompt, but then I continued it again. So let's keep rolling through here, and we're going to look at some of the details of what it did. This is where the Azure MCP and the Azure plugin are really playing an important role. So it's looking for relevant skills. So let's check out the skills that it's looking for. These are some of the skills that we talked about. So there's an Azure Prepare skill. Let's take a look and see what's in this Azure Prepare skill. But let's look at it in a friendly way. So Azure Prepare. Basically, we have a lot of text in here to help steer the model towards following the guidelines that we have. So you'll see a lot of mandatory, authoritative, oh, didn't mean to jump, authoritative, official, canonical. We're learning a lot in terms of how to get the model to move down the path that we want it to go in order to help you be successful. So there's a lot in here. So these are some of the triggers that we set up. So if the user says, create a new application or add services or components, those are things that help trigger this particular skill so that the model will call it and kind of get you onto the golden path. We have a bunch of rules in here too. Things like validate before you do a deploy. So this is, hey, we need to call that Azure validate skill before calling the Azure deploy skill. These are rich. I would encourage you, when you install the plugin, all of this is going to land on your machine, all of these skills. Feel free to take a look. Learn from what we've done and share your insights. We don't have a corner on the market of intelligence when it comes to the best way to do this. We are learning. And I did see there was a question in the chat earlier about how do we test all of this stuff. We have a pretty rich evaluation system to help us test. We test across the skills, we test across the MCP tools, and we are testing against multiple models, and we can even test, we're working on systems that'll help us test across more and more clients. Right now, we do a lot of our testing through Copilot CLI because that approach is really easy to take and pull into a testing framework. But we have teams at Microsoft that are working on testing in VS Code and Claude Code and Visual Studio, you name it, like all of that's available for us to work with. So this is an example of one of the skills. In this skill, so it's reading through that skill. Great. Now, Copilot is going to go through and just look at what's going on inside the Flask application so it can understand better what it needs to do. And then this is just some information Copilot gave itself back. Okay, so the app is already fully prepared for Azure deployment. It has a Docker file. In this case, this one had an azure.yaml file. We have infra. And now it's going to go and it's going to create that private GitHub repo that we talked about. It's going to push the code there, and it's going to configure the AZD pipeline. So it's going to do all of these steps for me. There is a step in here where part of setting up this repo, I have to do some manual work because of security we have around our Microsoft repositories. And so, the other thing I should mention, at the start of that previous question, I was actually in plan mode. So I wanted it to build the plan instead of actually doing the execution for me. And then I told it, okay, let's go ahead and let's switch to agent mode, and it can build things. So it's checking to make sure it has the right GitHub account. I have two that I switch back and forth between. So it's switching to my correct account here. And then it's looking at the skill, and here it's looking at the Azure deploy skill. So it's going to run this pre-deploy checklist. And if we preview this one, so it's going to check, get the current subscription. We even give it some fallback commands if it needs to use the Azure CLI to do things. And then we have here where we want it to specifically ask the user questions. So Ask User is a tool that is part of Copilot inside of VS Code, Copilot CLI. And so we're saying use that tool to prompt the user. Ask them for their input on some of these things. So in this case, which Azure subscription would you like to use? And we give it some steering. Don't use free-form input. Use the form to do it. We're going to create an AZD environment first, and we're going to check to see if the resource group already exists. This causes problems. If it does, you're going to have a deployment failure. So there's a lot of these little steps that we go through, things that you would normally have to manually do or problems you could potentially run into. We are trying to short circuit a lot of that and make sure that you don't hit those issues and the agent and you can be successful. So now the plan is creating the GitHub repo and deploying to Azure with CI/CD. So I'm not using AZD in this case for doing my local deployment. It comes up with different phases that it wants to do. And so a lot of this, I think it's really important to note, like this is Copilot coming up with the plan. And at the same time, it's using the skills and the tools that we provide so it can help build a better plan to do this. We're going to come down here. It's going to, phase 2 is it's going to actually do the deployment. It's going to confirm subscriptions. It's going to check the AZD environment, make sure that it's going to the right location, West US 2. A lot of these pieces are here. This is the files that it needs in order to do the deployment. And then decisions. So this is where we finished plan mode and it said, hey, do you want me to do this? And so there's a button that typically shows up when it finishes plan mode and you can start the implementation. So I would love to be able to sit here and show you like all these steps, but honestly, they take quite a while. The nice thing in this case is other than these points where Copilot's asking me questions, I can have it go off and do this work and I can work on other things. And then Copilot will make a ding and send a little notification on my computer and say, hey, I'm done with this step. Come check in with me. So it's super handy to be able to do this. So when I say start implementation, it created this to-do list of all these things. It actually did push the code to GitHub. Sometimes it doesn't check everything off. And I'm not sure about this last step here that it didn't do, but it is nice. It'll often create a to-do list. It'll check these things off. So we can see that it created the to-dos. And then the deployment is running. So here we go. We're basically wrapping up. So all of that happened in that to-do loop. And then, okay, here we go. So now we have the repo. So it provisioned the resources. We have the repo, and it's going to go ahead and set up this as a remote, and it's going to push. There we go. This is where I had to tell it, yes, I had some work to do. Keep going. I had to go approve something. It was getting stuck on. So now it basically finished. Yeah, we get down here. It got stuck. I was having some network issues, but it did run Playwright to actually test. So now let's take a look at this. And now that we've talked through this code long enough, let's come in here. So you can see this right here, we are on a different site. This is actually in Azure. This is not on my local machine. And I am going to give you, let me find this real fast. I don't know how well this is going to work. We will certainly find out. Let me find my YouTube video. I'm going to send you a short URL so you can go check it out. I think I scaled it well enough, so it should work while we're talking, but we will find out soon. It is set up with Azure Container Apps, and it's set to be able to scale, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a second. So this is my website now. I can come in here. I can browse. I'm going to come in and let's sort this by the most parts. One of the things that's really nice, it actually runs quite a bit faster when it's sitting in Azure than when it's sitting on my local machine and having to query all this information from my database in Azure. So these are all the big sets. This is a fun way to look at it, to see some of the big things that Lego has created over the years. Some of these are just phenomenal. I love checking out all these wonderful things, and they're great. They're colorful. They're exciting. It's a great way to explore data. So now let's do this. I want to do one more. And so we deployed, there is, okay, we're going to wing this one. I don't have my exact thing. So one of the things I could do, so if everybody watching this is out there hitting my website, say it's slowing down, then I'm going to come in here. I'm going to say, scale this app up to 3 active instances of the container app and allow it to scale up to 10 based on load. Okay. It didn't get all my words perfectly, but let's see what it's going to do. And let's turn off this. So now I've deployed, but maybe everybody's hitting it and the website starts getting slow. And I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think about production level deployment. And so I can give Copilot a prompt, and what it's going to do, it's going to go look at the infrastructure as code, and it's going to say, hey, here's the changes I need to make. It should come back. Oh, I got a failure. My request too large. All right, this is a Copilot issue I've run into a couple times, and I'm not going to be able to get out of it in this chat. But what I can do, we will run this in a new chat, and it has none of the existing context. It's going to have to go read the files, but that's fine. It'll handle this. So we've gone through a lot of things today. I know we have about 8 minutes left here, and what I would love to hear is, now I have some great time. If you have some questions that you would like me to answer live, go ahead and drop those in the chat, and I'm happy to take questions right now and answer things, and we can see. So, oh, here we go. So it's going to change this. Okay, here's one of my favorite commands. This is why I love working with Copilot. So if you didn't grow up in the, I think they're still active today, but I think this was probably the 80s or 90s when they were out there. So there's a band called Salt and Pepper, and what it takes, Copilot just knows, hey, when I say this, it's going to commit and it's going to push things for me, because Salt and Pepper had a song called Push It. And so here we go. Yes, I do want you to push it. And we even got the little emojis. That was fantastic. So this is an important part too. Have fun when you're working with your agents. They've got a great sense of humor, or a lot of them do, and you can have a good time with it. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to check the chat real quick. So this sums up in hot use, GitHub Copilot CLI or chat, and how it can help us deliver more efficient code to Azure Cloud. I don't know that there's necessarily a question there, but yes, I would say we barely scratched the tip of the iceberg here. If I go over, we're just going to let that run. I'm going to switch back to the deck, and I'm going to share. Let me jump to the end here. That's not the one I wanted. This one right here. So if you check me out on LinkedIn, there's my link down here at the bottom. There's some blog posts that I've had recently. One of those goes through a huge number of different prompts you can try, covering a bunch of different services. So I'd encourage you to check that out, because it might inspire you to see, like, what is the breadth of things that we can cover here. I do hope that in this, Ernesto, that it is really helping make things more efficient for you. It's still going to take time. Good things do take time, but hopefully Copilot can go off and do work while you are doing something else that's important, and then you can come back in and check on it. Can you use Copilot? So this is from resident, let's see, XGC. Can you use Copilot to run tests against your existing site and find bugs? Absolutely. So using it depends on how deep you want to go, but you can definitely set up both some reasonably simple tests like we did where we used Playwright and we just said, hey, go check all the pages, check the controls. I can give it specific end-to-end tests that I want to do. So for more complex applications that I write, I will tell Copilot, create end-to-end tests for certain scenarios, and then go execute those against my site. I'll be honest, the one challenge that I have with that is getting Copilot to always do it. Always, always, always before I come back. And so, and I find that whether it's Copilot in VS Code, Copilot CLI, Claude Code, I've tried lots of places. It's not always consistent about running those end-to-end tests for me. And when it doesn't, that just means that I have work to do. I either find the issues or I have to remind it to run the end-to-end tests. But definitely use Copilot to help you out with that. And then looks like Jim Weber, 6640 said, what certification do you recommend for this combination of technology stack? Jim, to be honest, I am not sure. So I have not spent a lot of time looking at certifications lately. The sense that I have is a lot of certifications tend to lag behind where the community, where our whole ecosystem is right now. Anthropic did put out one recently. I haven't had a chance to go deep and look at it yet, but I am planning on checking that out. Microsoft may have some that I haven't looked into. And so I would say that is a great place, but I know a lot of people are emphasizing doing their learning either through YouTube videos, getting online and using Twitter, search, even just use one of your agents, ask it questions. How do I do this? And I would say hands down, the best way to do it is come up with a problem that you want to solve and then just go start working at solving that problem with an agent, build something, troubleshoot it. That's been by far the best way that I've learned over this time. In addition to, I get to work with amazing people like Kay, who's in the chat, and her whole team and other teams. It's a fantastic group that I get to learn from every single day. So if you've got people like that can help you out too. But find a little pet project. My wife raises goats. I created an application to help her manage the health and history and breeding schedules, all these things of the goats that she has. And it was fun to build it. And then I ended up throwing it away because I found somebody else was building one that was far ahead of me, and his is only $10 a month. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go spend my time on something else. But I would say find those little projects, build things, and that's a fabulous way to learn. Let's see. SE Get, I'm not sure how I'm going to pronounce that one. But do you find that most orgs take the canned skills, adding scoping, tailoring layer for their concerns, security patterns, engineering patterns? That is a fabulous question. So I would say treat what we have as a starter set of skills. The things that are there. These are the best practices that we know, but your organization may have something completely different in mind. One of the ways that we're trying to morph our skills, our instructions to match your organization is by looking at policies that you have in place inside of Azure. But by all means, take the skills that we have and then layer your own on top of those so that you can provide your guidance to help ensure that maybe you don't use container apps. Maybe you only use Azure Kubernetes, or maybe you only use app service. So you can provide guidance to the model so that it's only going to choose the path that you want. We have things in here that say, don't ever use like SAS tokens and things for security. We don't want to use passwords. We don't want to use tokens. We want to use managed identity in Azure so that we don't have credentials floating around in the system. We want to try and be secure by default, but we can only take that so far, because sometimes with that security comes additional cost, comes complexity. And so you should feel free to layer your own on top of that. And with that question, I think we're at time. Anna, do you have anything that we need to do to wrap up here? Oh, Hassan, fabulous question. I was just going to switch to the next page. So aka.ms /azure-skills, this is the place to go. And from here, there's instructions. This is where the plugin is located. It'll tell you how to install inside of the various clients that are out there. Give that a shot and definitely send us feedback. Fantastic. And with that, I think we're done. Anna may have trouble coming back in if there's anything we need to do to wrap up the chat. But thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I left my connection information on the previous slide. Connect, ask your questions, jump into the repo, that Azure Skills repo, share your feedback there. Kay's team runs that repo, and they're fabulous. So some of the best engineers I've ever worked with. Certainly let us know what you think. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you all for joining, and thanks again to our speakers. This session is a part of a series. To register for future shows and watch past episodes on demand, you can follow the link on the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find that link on the screen or in the chat. And we'll see you at the next one.